So my name is Jill. Karen and I both work in the history room at Patent Free Library, and we decided to do History Room Live so that our patrons could still get access to some of our resources and services online while we're shut down. Today, Karen's going to talk about some of her favorite tips for learning about genealogy online. I also want to mention that next week I'll be talking about postcards in our collection in honor of National Postcard Week. And I'll show you how to make postcards at home. But today, we're going to hear from Karen. We welcome questions. You can feel free to interrupt. I recommend using the chat function. I'm going to be monitoring that. So if you do have a question, Karen might not see it, but I will make sure that it gets heard. And that's really all I'm going to be doing today. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen now.
All righty. And I'm going to do the whole share my screen and hope it all goes according to plan. So let me first, there, do you see a the online educational resources? Okay.
Yeah.
Bump this over here. There, I see all the faces, but now they're on a different screen because otherwise it just sort of gets in my way. Okay, hold on, bear with me for one moment. There we go. So I just wanted to put up this little image of kind of what I'm going to talk about today. And let me go through a little spiel here. So hello, my name is Karen, as she said, and thank you for joining us. I've been researching my family history for some years now, and I've been a volunteer in the history room for I think seven-ish years. I've also been volunteering in the Topsom Public Library for 5 or so years doing a genealogy drop-in, which is kind of where I got this, kind of where this came from. So while the library is closed, of course, Jill and I will be offering weekly sessions, providing information, guidance, and a chance to ask questions. As she said, these sessions are recorded and will be available on the library's website soon. So whether you're watching live or viewing the recording, I hope you'll find this to be informative and useful. Today, we'll be talking about online educational opportunities. Now, by that, I mean resources to increase your knowledge or improve your research skills. I'm constantly trying to learn more, and right now there are even more opportunities to take advantage of because so many things are going online that normally. Some of these resources may appeal more to genealogists, but many of them are also great for those of you who are homeschooling. And I really want to emphasize that the history room is not just for genealogists. It is for everyone: students, educators, historians, authors, surveyors, real estate agents. Those are just a few examples of the people who have been in this room and used the resources. And now, of course, we're also including things online. And Jill just put a bunch of resources on our website, so you'll find even more there. So bit of a webinar junkie, so there are several of those mentioned in today's session, but I do have other resources to share as well. So I'm going to talk briefly about each of these, and I'll explain why I think they're worth your time. And then I'll focus more on the last item, the Familysearch Wiki, because that is one of my favorite things. So it was really tough deciding what to talk about because there are so many and I could say a lot about all of them. But I'm going to try to get through all of these. And if you want to learn more about any of these, you can feel free to suggest them to have their own sessions in future talks that we have if you want us to spend more time on any of these. So also, before I really dive in, let me also mention, in addition to anything I say here, I also always highly recommend people check your local organizations, libraries, archives, historical societies, museums, and so on, because some of them have online exhibits or records or other content, blogs, articles, and so forth. Many of them have a social media presence and are staying engaged with patrons by sharing images or information about local history. And they might even offer virtual programs through their website or social media or both. So be sure to check those. So I think that covers what I wanted to talk about here. So one of the first things I want to mention is this blog from the Maine State Library's state genealogy librarian. And I believe she is the only person who has that title. I think that's what she said. Oops, I just made it small. So let me move something here because it's getting in my way. There we are. So BJ is very knowledgeable. She has a genealogy club that normally would meet once a month in person. Of course, right now we can't do that. So she has, as many people have, she has adapted and is providing sessions online. She does at least 2 a week. Actually, it's 3 a week because she does a tech session as well. So she records these, and you can find the recordings online, and I'm showing you here. You can see some of them. These are the tech sessions. A little further down are the regular, if you will, club sessions talking about a variety of genealogy topics. And one of my favorites, actually, I don't know about favorite, but bookshelf favorite. She even talks about what she has on her bookshelf. You can subscribe. The best way to really follow along is to subscribe to it. And this link here will take you to the Maine State Library site. And then over here is where you can sign in, and you'll get an email with the Zoom link and the times. She'll continue to keep you updated as to sessions that are upcoming and any bonus sessions, because she's actually doing a couple of extra ones this week. There are even sessions for librarians. So of course, most of you wouldn't be joining that necessarily, but they are recorded so you can still watch them, and it might be useful to see how she approaches that and how that might be a little bit different way of thinking about it that could actually help regular people also in learning how to approach these things. And she has other links as well on this blog, and I cannot forget to mention too that we kind of have our own little mascot. Her cat Scout pretty much always makes an appearance. So if you love cats, then that alone might be a reason to come join. So another resource, moving on now, Franco-American programs through UMaine. Now I realize this is very specific to an ethnicity. However, of course, being Maine, we have a lot of Franco-Americans. And so right now, these are the sessions they have in May, a few different ones. There were a bunch in April. They are recording them. They're not up yet, but I assume they will be soon. And I definitely recommend watching them. I've only caught a couple of them so far, and it was they were very good sessions talking about the Acadians. You can also go to the home page. If you click on here, I'm putting this up because there are actually several other resources that I would recommend taking a look at. And I'm not necessarily, I don't have time to go exploring and showing you all of them, but there are the Franco-American Archives, which includes some oral histories. These papers. There are some papers that have some information about Franco-Americans, and of course some other things in here as well. So I hope you all will come and take a look there, join some of the webinars maybe, and if nothing else, at least look at their archives and their papers and see what else they have for information. So the next one I want to mention, the Northeast Georgia History Center, and I realize that is not even remotely close to local. Whoops, let me close that out. But even places that are far away are still offering programs that could be really, really useful. Now, here's a list of some of their upcoming live streaming sessions. And you can see, I was really surprised. Even Star Wars is a topic which caught me off guard. Open fire cooking, American Girl dolls. I especially like the Ask a Historian session. Now they've had several. The ones that I saw first when they first started doing this were very much about historical people, and they were staff members or a hired person who would be dressed in character as that historical person, talking about their life. They would spend roughly half an hour or so providing some information about their life, and then the next half hour would be taking questions. It's very interactive. I think it's geared especially towards kids, towards students, but even, I apologize for that. I've logged into Facebook right now so that we can see this, but all these pop-ups keep happening. So it's geared more towards kids, I believe, but there are a number of sessions here that I found interesting as well. So this is their YouTube channel. They do record them, and this is where you can find a lot of them. Or if you prefer, I found it easier to watch the live stream from YouTube than from Facebook. So you could see, you know, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Rosie the Riveter, Andrew Jackson, Choctaw leader. So they have a number of various characters and topics that you can listen to and learn about. Let me make sure that was, yep. And as well, you can go to their website and there were more resources there as well. So the next one I want to talk about, and let me move this up here. Okay, Legacy Family Tree webinars. This is one of my favorite resources. Now it is a subscription site, but they do have, if you come to this webinar library link here, you can see they have one that says review all free. And they have a number of presenters and topics. And their presenters come from a variety of backgrounds: archivists, librarians, lawyers, among other things. That's just to name a few of their careers, their training and so forth. Now you see there's some that are in another language. They were noticing that in their live sessions that they had people from all over the world, and it occurred to them it might be a good idea to market to everybody by providing sessions in some various languages. So they've been doing that a lot, and they also have once a month they do their webinar Wednesday in the evening to make it a little easier for those who are in other time zones. So there are a number of, I swear there are some in English, like, whoops, it just went by. There was one about city directories, for instance. Yes, city directories, much more than ye old phone books. I happen to really like city directories.
Me too.
Hello, what?
I said me too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
And some of them are specific to particular ethnicities or the science of family history even. So there's a lot of good stuff here. I also wanted to mention that the live sessions are free. They have a webinar every Wednesday pretty much, unless, you know, something happens for some reason. But almost always there's a webinar every single Wednesday that's live. If you register and if you're able to get into the live session, that is free. And for the first 7 days after the live session, the webinars are free, and then it goes behind the paywall. And let me show you. So you can see on the home page, it will show you what's coming up. Here's just a few of them that are coming up. And like I said, they do cover a number of topics. So there's pretty much something for everybody. And I'm not one to subscribe to very many things. I'm pretty cheap, but I do subscribe to these webinars because I like being able to get to them anytime I want. And they are really useful. So moving on now, the next one is Conference Keeper. And normally this is specifically for live conferences, the ones you would physically have to go to. But of course, with everything being canceled, they have kind of moved it into just keeping track of a lot of virtual programs. And it's been useful for me. I've attended a couple of conferences that I would not have normally been able to get to. And there are a number of just individual sessions as well, things that have nothing to do with a conference. So you can find all kinds of events that are going on in here, various webinars. You can hover over the date or hover over one of these, and you can see it'll pop up. You can click on that. And you can choose other ways of viewing this if you don't happen to like trying to view it in this format that's set up here. There are other ways to have it set up. There are also, and I was just noticing this, and this is something Jill and I will want to keep in mind, opportunities. Yes, this is where it is. They also have genealogy jobs, but what I really wanted to point out was the awards, grants, and scholarships, which is not only for individuals, but also for organizations. So that might be something to, for us to keep in mind, even for patent-free library, because there might be possibly opportunities to gain grants or other financial aid for projects, which would be excellent. So another thing I wanted to mention regarding this is when you're on their homepage, there's going to be a big giant subscribe button. And I don't like to subscribe to, and I don't mean paying, I mean as in signing up for the newsletter. And I don't necessarily like to do that with a lot of things, but I am glad that I did that with this, receiving the weekly email. When I got an email this past week, I was looking around and there was a whole list of upcoming events from a number of organizations. And it was worth that because I started looking at some of these organizations, and I have no reason to do any research in a lot of these places, but a lot of these archives, libraries, historical societies have a number of resources on their websites. So when I was at, I think it was East Washington Historical Society, I noticed they had digital digests online that anybody can access for free. You can download them. And you might wonder why I would care about East Washington. Well, they have an index. And I wanted to show you that, sure, yeah, there are, some that are specific to Washington or Iowa, but there's also Ireland's archive collections, a genealogist in a cemetery. And there were a few more that I wanted to point out. A Better Place, Death and Burial in 19th Century Ontario. There was another one, Brick Walls and Serendipity, White Slaves, Colonial Era British Emigration. So even though this is out of East Washington, there are a number of topics that would apply to pretty much anybody, really, possibly. So I always encourage people to go exploring in new places. So moving on, and let me move my little document, keeping track of what I'm talking about here. Okay, so Maine Memory Network. I'm sure most of you have heard of this. Pardon me. Now, what I'm not sure if everybody knows is the number of ways that you can really explore this site. So of course you have a bunch of places on here you can click on and go exploring, and there's a search tab up above. Well, there are also things directly aimed at educators and students. So for instance, we have bicentennial lesson plans. Some of them are themed. So there are things in here if you have a student at home, or if you even just on your own are just really curious and like to learn, you can check that out. On this, in the classroom link, there's some information in here about ways to use this resource for education. If you're a student or a teacher, you can have an account and it will allow you to you can create albums and save and sort some of the primary source items that you find, and share those albums. I believe there were ways to make notes and stuff as well. And I'm trying to remember where I saw that, but I would encourage you to come explore this area of Maine Memory Network because there are a number of other resources as well, like some of these student albums that were created. There are a couple of examples here that you can take a look at. And I believe even if you're not a student or an educator, you can create an account and kind of create that sort of thing. So there are a number of things you can do in here. And then just in general, of course, there are loads of, here we are, that's where I'm trying to go to. I was writing up something about an ancestor who happened to be a nurse, and I was actually doing a Google search. I wasn't even in Maine Memory Network, but one of the results that came up was from here. And there's a whole slideshow with all this, there are pictures, of course, but what I really appreciated especially was the information about nursing. And this comes in just little bits, but you get to kind of read about what nursing was like at the time and how it changed. And then there's this whole article. I mean, we think of Maine Memory Network as exhibits, images, that sort of thing, but there's also there are also articles and other types of resources as well. So you can learn a lot about various topics. Just kind of go looking around. You never know what you're going to find. So I'm going to close out a couple of those. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, I have, I think, a couple of more before I get to Familysearch. Digital Maine Repository. Not sure if this is, how well known this is to everybody, but the Maine State Library is, they are the ones who put this together. So this is sort of a place for organizations throughout Maine to be able to share their resources. And through this one, with Maine Memory Network, it's all images. With Digital Maine Repository, libraries and archives and et cetera, they can have a lot of format, just about any format, I think, probably PDFs, images, a number of other formats. So there's a little more flexibility in that sense. Also, usually when you find something you're interested in, when you click on it, it will actually bring you back to that organization's website. So I'm not going to have time to poke around in here a lot, but I do want to show you, one of the ways you can, of course, you can come up here and you can type in a term. You can also search by subject. And it's going to just take its sweet time to come up. So there are a number of topics in here, including sciences, maths, social sciences, business, arts and humanity. So there are a whole lot of topics that you can explore. In fact, last year I was using this a lot for my geology class, and I was finding a bunch of documents that were really useful in learning about the geology of different locations. So let me see if I can spell this right. So if you go in the search term as well, if you want to use it that way instead, Saginaw, you get some options for filtering. So you can filter by discipline, which I think is kind of interesting if you had a particular focus. And of course, keeping in mind that even, environmental sciences and all those things, some of them might be more recent, but especially if some of them are older, those are always relevant to genealogy and any kind of historical research, because it's interesting and also informative to know about the environment that our ancestors lived in, and to know about, for instance, the legislation of the time and the politics. Because I also saw, let me click on this book gallery, because you can choose publication type as well. And I believe I saw some legislative books. See if I can figure out where I found it last time. Well, anyway, legislative history, here's one of them. So I just think that sort of thing is really relevant even though sometimes it may not be as interesting. But I want you all to know the variety of things that you can find in here. I hope you'll come and explore. And also I want to mention that this is, Digital Maine Repository is, what do they call it? A service hub to the DPLA, which is Digital Public Library of America. And that is, they're trying to gather information or become a connection point for states all across the US. And that makes our stuff even more findable, which is always a good thing. All right, so the next one I'm going to talk about is American Ancestors, which of course is through the New England Historic Genealogical Society. And again, this one I'm sure many of you have heard of. But I want to make sure that you're aware of, you know, the number of things that are in here. So for instance, down here, there is a whole section just for kids. And let me just bring that up briefly so you can see. Interview a relative, go on a family history scavenger hunt, make your own journal or a pop-up card, which actually kind of ties into Jill's idea of creating your own postcards. It's a little different, but same idea. So there are a number of things in here, and I can tell you, this interview a relative, Jill and I both love storytelling and stories. So at some point in the future, we will be talking about oral histories and so forth. So that might be something that comes up again. There are, see if I can get down here, some family history guides. These are free, but when I clicked on one of them, it did want me to enter an email address. So apparently you do need to send away for it by email. You don't just go and click on it and download it, but still they are free. And whoops, my screen just got away from me. And here are a couple more. So now up here, still on the home page, I haven't really left it yet, except for that little brief foray to the children's section. On this Learn button, now it's largely webinars, but there is this Explore Subject Guides. And there are a number of topics in here that you can take a look at. I'm going to scroll a little.
Can I interrupt you with a question?
Sure.
We have a question from Charity. She says, speaking of environment, would the environment of Bath in the 1800s be the same as today? I think that was in reference to something you said a couple minutes ago.
And also possibly something she saw, because I think there were I think some items in here that referred to Bath environs and stuff. I would think, and I'm definitely not necessarily an expert on that sort of thing, but from everything I have heard, seen, read from people a lot more knowledgeable about such things than I would say that it's probably not necessarily the same, but it also depends on what time period you're talking about. Because, you know, there have been different times. Well, for instance, somebody had told me, one of the people who spoke at the Town History Series was talking about place names in the area. And one of them was New Meadows. And he said, well, the reason it's called that is because it didn't used to be a meadow. They cut it. It used to be all trees and forests and such. And it was called New Meadows after they clear cut the whole place and turned it into one. So definitely I would say there have been some changes, but again, it depends on the time period, and in some cases, changes that we've made, maybe trees have grown back, not in the New Meadows area necessarily, of course, but so hopefully that answers the question. But I would say Peter might be a good one to ask as well about that. I think he might know more about it than I would. Peter Goodwin, who is one of the other staff members at the library. Yeah, I think you can email him. It's his, I'm sorry?
Peter would know about geological changes and climate changes, things like that. But I think you're right about the trees. I've definitely seen photos of Bath in the 1800s, and there just aren't any trees. Or there are a bunch of elm trees that we don't have anymore, like on Washington Street. So I would say that yes, broadly, the environment would have been quite a bit different.
Yeah.
Sharon, you're asking, where's Peter? Peter's at home. Peter will still be working with us when we reopen as a substitute. And he's been working on some projects at home, just like the rest of us. So, Karen, you want to keep on going?
Sure. Yep. So one of the things I wanted to touch on specifically in here is this Scottish genealogy. For one reason because I've already kind of brought up something about French Canadian, but Scots are another very strong ethnicity in this state. So there are several clickable areas here, which I think basically bring you, I think if I just scroll down, I see all the same stuff, but you can see there are a number of things that they touch on in talking just about Scottish genealogy. And that includes going to the library to search their online catalog and find things specifically about Scots, links to some books that they suggest, information about vital records, plus some links to various resources for that. Scotland's People is one I've heard a lot about, and it is definitely one of the go-to sites for Scottish genealogy. And so you can see there are a number of links here. So American Ancestors does have loads of stuff. I mean, I think a lot of people think of it in terms of maybe the records and the databases and stuff, but as you can see, there's more to it than that. So definitely go exploring, take a look, see what you can find. I always encourage the exploring. Oh yes, there was. I'm glad I made a checklist over here for me to look at, because I did have one other thing I wanted to mention way at the bottom of the website. There is a blog called Vita Brevis, and I don't remember what that means. They mention it somewhere, but I forget. I actually I tend to see it more on Facebook. I don't necessarily come to their website, but their blogs very often will have excerpts from letters and diaries and so forth. There are also a lot of discussions about just various historical aspects. This one's talking about the Phillips house. This one here, using the library from home. So they wrote a blog post about their library catalog and how you can still use it even though they're closed. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to highlight that as well. So I do recommend taking a look at their blog in addition to everything else. And okay, so now moving on to my favorite resource, and there. So Familysearch.org is, well, it's their wiki especially, that it is one of my absolute favorite resources, and you'll hear a lot of genealogists say that same thing. It is an excellent place to go to learn about locations, topics, whatever. And I realize the word wiki might make people cringe a little bit, but I promise you it's not just a free-for-all. They do actually have some control over that. So it is well known in the genealogy world. You can click on the map to search. You can browse by country in this little link here. There are a few links down here if you wanted to go specifically to a couple of topics that they've got shown. But I want to go through, just type in the search bar, and you can tell I've been there recently. So you could type in a location and hopefully it will take me there. Here we are. So there's a reason I'm showing you this first. And I'll tell you that in a second. So when you go to a location, and obviously topics will be a little bit different, but when you're looking for a location, and this is a great place to start, when you first learn of a place that your ancestor has come from, say you just discovered that your ancestor came from this location of Italy. You can come in here, take a look, and there's a map. Immediately it's showing you where in Italy it's located. There are a number of links over here from Research Strategy, Record Finder, and all of these different record types. And you have an Ask the Community button, Italy online genealogy records, which generally takes you, I think, to record collections right within Familysearch. You get background on Italy, including languages. So if you're not familiar with the Italian language, what that does is it kind of lists the terminology you're likely to see very frequently, like birth, death, marriage, all those types of things. And there's even a letter writing guide. So it's really great. And you have a number of bits of information. And you see there's a lot in here for this particular location. And that includes links to not only the Familysearch, but it will also provide links to anywhere really that has relevant records. And it might even be to Ancestry, and it will usually indicate if it's a paid site. You'll see a little $sign. So you could see there are quite a few, quite a number of resources and bits of information here. Even how to read the records, tips for finding your ancestor, so forth. So that's not where I wanted to go next. Hold on. So now let me go to a little closer to home. So Saginaw, Maine. And again, there's this link to Maine online genealogy records. Actually, let me pop that open just so you can see what you end up with. So it takes you to a web page that's specifically about Maine and has links to various databases that you can go directly to those collections. And like, see this one here has a little $sign. So it's showing you that that's actually a paid site. So you have a whole list here of the types of information they would like to have in these articles. So in this article for Saginaw, those are all the types of information that they would like to see and hope to have. And you see in some cases there's, you know, we got a little bit about county courthouse, but history is empty. Parent counties, it's got a little bit. We do have a little map over here, but compared to, you know, the Italy page, this doesn't have quite as much. We do have several links, which is really good to see. And now let me scroll back up, and I hope you guys all come and take a look in here and explore later. But I want to show you, for instance, because each town has their own page. And again, you see, these are all the bits of information we would like to have in there. And this is what it actually looks like. If I go to Georgetown, well, same thing, pretty much. Pittsburgh. And again, well, they do have information for the town clerk. So that's good. And of course, Woolwich. So as you can see, a lot of these are pages, are local pages, even Bath, surprisingly. They're pretty sparse. So we're being outdone by the Italians, of course. So I would love to see these get filled in. And this is something that some of you out there might be able to help with. So if you're, I mean, you don't have to be a historian, but if you're really knowledgeable about the local history and the resources, and if you have the time, I certainly hope that some of you will consider contributing to these pages to fill it in, because these are excellent resources for genealogists. I can tell you many, many, many of us come to this website looking for information. And it is always disappointing if we get to a page and there's nothing in there. So I certainly hope that this kind of urges you all to see what you can do to fix that, to, you know, make us shine in here. And I know you're all on the edges of your seats now wondering how you can help. So let me show you. over here, I think it is the edit the wiki. I believe that was the page that I needed. There are 3 ways to contribute. And this page will tell you all about how to take part. And they have other links over here as well that provide further information. So you can, edit directly, but you have to become an editor or page creator, and they have a process that they go through for that. Or you can submit information to somebody else who is an editor or in charge of a page. And I believe there's another way, and of course now I can't remember. But anyway, I just really wanted to make sure to share this with you because I'm really hoping to see these pages get filled in. That would be fantastic. And let me make sure that I covered, yep, so, and I did mention, this is not a free-for-all. As you can see, you can't just come in and just start editing and changing things. So it is more reliable than maybe when one thinks of wikis. This is actually a better kind of wiki. And then in addition to all that, I wanted to let you know that we did have some resources listed on our history room page anyway, but now there are even more. So here's I'm trying to think, I hit the link directly that Jill shared with me in my email. So let me come here now and see, it must be through genealogy resources page still. Okay, yeah. So as long as you go to the history room page when you're at patent free, just go to history room page. And I keep losing my little mouse there. And click on genealogy resources. And that will take you to this page. And do keep checking back because this is going to be updated continually. It's still a work in progress. And you see there's already quite a bit in here, including Register of Deeds and assessors, because there are things you can do online through those websites. So some of them are local. We have statewide, national. So we have a number of resources in here, and I hope you will all come take advantage of that. So those are just a few of the places that you can use. And let me move this over here now. There we are. So these are just a few of the resources that you can use to expand your knowledge and maybe improve research skills. So I encourage you to also check your local organizations, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that about covers everything I wanted to talk about. And we still have some time. So if there are any questions, or if you wanted to see something further, if you wanted to go do a search on anywhere.
I have
Karen?
one question. Well, I have a few, but I'm gonna, so I am very much into family history genealogy, and I am feeling a little bit lost because I'm having a hard time accessing obituaries from like the 80s. And I was wondering if you had like a resource that I could plug into to find that. If you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, from the 1980s, right? I assume 1980s.
Yeah, 1980s. I'm
I
sorry.
think what is that? I know, like in this particular world, you have to really be specific. But
Yes.
But I figured that was what you meant. Now, and I don't know, Jill might also want to pipe in here. Let me actually go to. Let me move this down a little. I'm wondering if there's something in the if there are any digital Maine library databases. I'll admit I don't necessarily do a lot of searching for obituaries from this time period. And I think they might be a little harder to find sometimes just because so many newspapers are subscription only, and in some cases they might have an archive, but whether or not you can access the archives might vary. So you can go to particular newspaper websites and see if they have archives. That would certainly be one thing I recommend. And let me see if there's anything in here specifically about newspapers. I know that I had seen in the past some databases that had newspapers in them, and there's nothing that says newspapers, but I might just not know which which of these to be looking at. Jill, do you have any?
You're right, but I also don't know off the top of my head which ones have a newspaper index.
Okay, so I guess
we do have access to the New York Times through the library. So
we do, right.
We're looking for somebody very special who had a New York Times obituary. You could look at those. Okay, locally, what you're saying is right, Karen. It's harder to find.
Sometimes the historical societies keep that.
Right.
That's true. Yes.
And
yes.
Like I found some like on Ancestry, on my Ancestry account. It's just a really good like starting off point of finding family members and stuff. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah. So
and, can I add? Yep. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Well, we have been indexing local area obituaries from the present day. So we may have the ability to find out where those are, and then we can look for them in our microfilms of like the Times Record and Bath Independent. So that's something that you
obituaries is right
email
there.
us a reference question. Sorry, what's that?
I'm sorry, this is Rory. Obituaries is on the page you're looking at right now under related categories.
Well, yes. So I was going to say, Cindy's list is another favorite resource for genealogists. And what I did is I went to there, and then I clicked on categories, and I think I went to N for newspapers. And so this here has specifics for newspapers, and I don't know how she has them arranged. And then, yes, there are related categories for obituaries specifically, but you can take a look through here. I'm just curious, newspapers M. Let's just click on that and see if it's by state or by name of paper. I'm not really sure. Madison, okay, I think it's by name of newspaper. But this is another resource. I have also used, and this is kind of spotty, but Google News Archive does have some newspapers. They're not digitizing them anymore, so what they have is all they have. And there aren't that many from Maine, and they're primarily out of Lewiston. But it really varies in the years that are available. So those are a few options, and I'm trying to think. Library of Congress. Oh, of course. How can I forget that? What is that called? Jill. Chronicling America. See if I spelled that right. Yep. So I would say you should also check here.
Okay.
Because you can search by state. And I'll admit, I still can't seem to get the hang of really properly and efficiently using any kind of newspaper resource, but this is definitely another one to use. And I'm trying to think where else. I'm sure as soon as we end this session, I'll think of a bunch more that are just not coming to mind right now.
What geographical area are you looking in?
But I'm looking in the Rumford area. I'm originally from the Mid-Coast, from Newcastle, but I moved up here, and I'm actually researching past families that have lived in my house that I live in now.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and I found a lot, but I'm just looking for some information regarding someone who has died in the house. So yeah, and someone who's like potentially buried on our property, that we think we know where she's buried, but we're not really sure. So we're busy figuring that out. So
of course, normally I would always say, look, contact the local historical society
Right.
I know they're not open. I guess it would be worth seeing if they have contact information on their website in case they might still be like Jill and other staff members are doing, even remotely checking their emails or
Yeah.
something like that. It might be worth asking the local people
Right.
if they know of news. Do they have, as this other lady mentioned, do they have newspapers?
Right,
within
and I found a newspaper article regarding this particular woman's burial, and it sounds a lot like on my property, and it's very specific. It says she's buried between 4 boulders that are rocks overlooking the river and the mountains, and I'm like, okay, that's literally right on my property. So I probed it, and I didn't really find anything, but I found some records and it doesn't say where she's buried. So I'm wondering how I do this now, because.
Well, in some cases it could be that, and not everybody gets markers and things. I guess it depends on the situation, especially where it's on private property. They may not necessarily be
Right.
markers, or if there were, it could be. And I guess,
So.
yeah, the 80s weren't that long ago, but sometimes things happen and they could have been destroyed if there was one through weather or
Right.
other reasons.
Okay.
Page, you have to mention this person was in the 1800s.
Yeah, this was in the 1800s. The 80s was the girl who died in this house, but.
Yeah, the 1800s definitely.
1800s.
So we have the 1800s and we have the 80s. So. Okay.
Yes, Rory, were you going to start to say something earlier?
No, I was just initially going to thank Karen for sharing with us, the presentation today, and then I'm not sure what I was going to. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Is you were asking about having people update the wiki, and when I noticed what the Patent Free was adding on its page, there were a couple links there that might be good links to put on that wiki for this area.
Yeah, there are lots. The problem is the wiki itself, to update that page, actually is going to require a lot of time and effort. And I know Jill is actually the one updating our website right now, and she's only just now finally having a chance to do that. Yeah. And that alone, because she's got a number of things that she's trying to do, because of course, I don't know, I'm not going to assume that all of you are familiar with the history room and all the people in it, but our very own Empress, as we call her, Robin, is retiring. So Jill is actually just now stepping into the role, and she's going to do a fantastic job. But of course, she's taking on a huge responsibility, and it takes a lot of time just to do even the website stuff on our own website, let alone having to update a wiki. So yeah,
it was just an observation that, and I wasn't suggesting that it that it was something that Jill and that the Patent Free should be doing. I just happened to notice, oh, well, there's a link that might, but.
I think we could certainly add ourselves as a library. I saw that libraries and museums was a tab.
Yeah, exactly.
Bath, and we ought to put ourselves in there. That's something we could do.
I know one thing I did not do is really look into the details of the process of becoming a creator or editor or whatever. I didn't go that far because I know I'm not going to have a chance to. Well, maybe soon I finally will. I don't know. We'll see how it goes when the semester is finally over and classes are over. But I don't know, Rory, do you have a lot of local knowledge, or any of the rest of you that?
No, I don't personally. I mean, I've done some reading but I know. I mean, your recommendation earlier to Paige about the local historical societies is a very good one, because I'm in West Bath, and I noticed that they have an online listing of all their newsletters going back years, and through those newsletters for the local historical society, you can find out lots of interesting information about your community that you never knew, about the oldest house or houses that used to be there that are no longer there, or hotels that used to exist on the coast that burned down, and I mean all kinds of very interesting stories, but I mean, that was, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too, is that it amazes me sometimes the things that I just stumble across when I'm not even looking for it.
Right.
And I especially loved that other place in East Washington had an index, so that, and I know that, I think, is it West Bath or is it Bath Historical? And Jill might know. One of them I know has an index to all their, to some of their, I forget what it is that they print that they have an index to, but anyway, it's.
Oh, is it the Georgetown Tide?
Maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. I could have the wrong town entirely, but yeah, somebody has an index to some of their printings, which is useful if you're looking for a particular topic. You don't have time to thumb through all of it, of course.
I have a question.
Sure.
I was in Patent Free. I'm looking under genealogy, and there was a lot of information in your microfilm. But are you guys starting to digitalize these microfilm resources?
Some of them. Go ahead, Jill. You you might be.
Oh,
more.
I was just going to say, we don't have any plans to at this point.
Okay.
There's a lot in the history room that could be digitized, and I'd like to digitize as much as we can. But that's something that I'm going to be thinking about in the next year. What gets digitized first?
Mm.
So it could be microfilm, but we also have such an amazing photograph collection, amazing postcard collection, and a lot of original materials that are also great candidates.
When I said sometimes, it was because there were some that were sent off newspapers. I think there was a project through the Maine State Library that some microfilms, and I forget
that's right.
which ones they were, had been digitized, but that was still in the process. I had been up to the library before everything closed, of course, and I was speaking with a couple of the people who actually work on those projects. And the one young lady who was actually a fellow student was showing me the work she was doing and talking about it. And she thought she had the Bath ones done, and then realized they were actually still sitting in this one particular to-do section. So they were almost finished and ready to be put online. And unfortunately, all this happened. So they're not quite available yet online. But yeah, it would be great to see a lot digital, but it's such a huge process, very expensive and time consuming. So yeah.
What tools does the library have for doing digitizing locally? I mean, at the library, or?
Well, thanks to the Maine Maritime Museum, they just got some equipment that is, I don't know how it compares to what they have at the Maine State Library, but it's a lot closer than the Maine State Library. And I think, isn't it large size, Jill? Is it big enough that it will take, like if we were doing the newspapers that we have in the room?
I haven't seen it myself, but I think they call it a book scanner.
Okay, yeah.
So it's probably designed to accommodate large format books because they have a lot of log books, which can vary in size. So yeah, that's a good point. We also have a lot of the original newspapers before they were microfilmed. So using the book scanner could work. We also have a flatbed scanner in the history room.
You do, okay, yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's about it.
So I think
yeah.
I saw a question go by, or a suggestion about getting volunteers to help with
Mm-hmm.
the digitizing.
Yeah, I just opened the chat, and yes, we always need volunteers. So there's another call to action.
There you go.
By all means, if you have the time or the knowledge, you can volunteer for the history room, or both. Contribute to the Familysearch Wiki for our pages. That would be fantastic. I am not at all shameless about, putting in plugs for that and making requests. And obviously, monetary donations are always welcome.
Oh yeah.
Actually, the volunteer that does the indexing of the current obituaries in the newspaper, he is retiring from volunteering, and so that's a position that we need filled right away. Somebody to go through the current newspapers and index those with name, date, so that we can help people like page find them.
Yes, he does that remotely too. He doesn't even, he used to come into the history room to do something, but he actually does it remotely and sends a digital file to the history room. So you wouldn't even have to leave your house to do such a thing.
Oh, interesting.
There are a lot of opportunities, remote volunteer opportunities right now. So if anyone's interested, please let us know.
Yes. And yes, some people do even retire from volunteering charity. It depends on sometimes health situations or other types of things that come up. So, or sometimes people, I think, just get to a point where they're like, okay, I need to really, really, truly retire now. All righty. Is there anything else? And also, yes, go ahead, Julie.
I'll just say thanks so much. This is my first
Yeah.
time learning anything about any resources. I have a sister in Virginia who just constantly puts together family trees, and I have no idea where to start. So thanks so much.
Oh, good, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was worried that I was going to be talking about things people had already heard of, especially American Ancestors and Maine Memory Network. So I'm glad that that this was useful.
Oh, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Jill, for helping organize it and be a part of it as well.
Yes, and I hope you all come back next week because Jill is going to be talking about postcards, and I can tell you she is very passionate about this stuff, just like I am, and we're all going to learn a lot. And have some of your own postcards ready because we could do a little show and tell as well.
They don't have to be historic because they will be someday. So.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you all
Yes.
for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thanks
much.
everyone for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All righty, have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks.